I'm good. I'm good. All right, everyone. So today we have Noo Saro-Wiwa, author of Looking for Transwonderland. I found this book somehow. I actually thought my friend had suggested it to me, but it turns out that's not the case. I had just picked it up randomly. Thank you, Amazon search engine, I guess. And just if you can hear me, just make sure you can thumbs up or something. But it was the best travel book I read last year. I picked it up. I couldn't put it down. I was in love with it right away. And then Lola, who is on our call, Lola Ahmed. Hi, Lola. I saw that Na lived in London and was a travel writer. And I thought, well, maybe Lola, who's connected to the European travel writers, might know her. And she did. And so she connected us. And now we are here today talking about her amazing book, kicking off the new year with such an incredible book that's so vivid and full of characters and wonderful observations. I'm very excited. This is the first time Na and I have spoken in person. So this is our first meeting, the 8 virtual meetups. So yeah, Na, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a real honor. Thank you.
So I wanted to sort of begin just a little bit background about yourself, how you kind of got into writing, travel writing, and then we'll move into just sort of how this book came about.
Yeah, well, I guess I always wanted to travel. That was the first thing, and then when I was a kid, and then as I got older, I thought I would combine my love of travel and writing. So initially I thought I'd become a journalist, like a foreign correspondent. And so I worked a little bit in news, like for ABC News in the London office. And then I went to study journalism at Columbia University in New York. But then I realized after that hard news was not my thing, that I really just wanted to explore societies in a non-headline kind of way. And that's when I discovered travel writing as a genre. It was actually a journalist called Martin Fletcher who wrote for the Times, a British paper. And at the end of he was the American correspondent, and he decided to travel around the backwards of America, the America that's not seen in the media and in the headlines. And so that mix of reportage with kind of creative style of writing really appealed to me. And that's when I discovered travel writing as a genre. And I thought that's what I definitely want to do.
How did this book come about? Did you go to Nigeria with this book in mind, or did you have this trip, and because it takes place in the mid 2000s?
It was 2008 predominantly.
Right. Yeah. So you went with this idea that you're going to write this book, or did you go and then come back?
Yeah. Well, basically, Transwonderland is actually my second book. The first book I wrote was about my travels in South Africa, and I turned down a deal to publish it for various reasons. And my publisher said to me, "Well, what's the next book you want to write?" And I said, "Well, I want to write about Nigeria." And she said, "Oh, let's do that." So, I had this desire to write about Nigeria, but alongside that was this very kind of personal journey where, because of, my father was a human rights activist, Noo Saro-Wiwa, and he was executed by the military dictatorship in the mid-90s. And so I'd stayed away from Nigeria for a long time. But in that time, I traveled a lot in Africa. I worked a little bit for Lonely Planet and Rough Guide. And it was through that travel guide work that I started to think about, going to Nigeria as a tourist. And it was a real light bulb moment. It was like, oh, wow, I could actually engage with Nigeria in that way. I don't have to go back to the village and mourn, the death of my father and how everything's changed. I can actually just, get my backpack and just, you know, travel around the country and see the sights and just do it completely differently. And, you know, I think a lot of us, we don't explore our backyards in the way that we explore, you know, places that are further away. And you realize that, you know, the country that, you know, the country of your birth and the country that you spent your summer holidays at is actually just as interesting and mysterious as, you know, the other far-flung places you want to go. And so by the time I decided I wanted to travel to Nigeria, I'd also realized that that should be my next travel book as well. So, so I got a book deal before I went out to Nigeria. So that whole trip was for the purpose of writing this book.
How long were you there for? Because it really, you know, in reading the book, you went all over the place, and, you know, you talk about like, oh, how you were here for a few days, and it just, and trying to like make a timeline of your trip, it really seems like you were there for quite a long time.
Yeah, I was there for about almost 5 months. It was about 4.5 months. And I spent, I think, maybe 3 weeks in Lagos initially. And then I hopped around. Like most places, I was there for perhaps 2 or 3 days in each place. Apart from Abuja, the capital city, I was there, I don't know, maybe about 2 weeks. But the thing is, when I travel, I can be quite lazy. I can spend a week somewhere, but actually only spend 4 days going out and about. I sort of get these sudden attacks of, what's the word? I don't know, misanthropy, I guess. I just don't want to talk to anyone. I want to stay in bed or, you know, whatever. So, you know, in a 4.5 month trip, I probably spent about maybe 2 or 3 weeks actually doing nothing on certain days. So.
I mean, you know, I always talk about travel burnout. You know, after a while, you're tired of moving around, especially like in countries where it's sort of a quote unquote hassle all the time, and it's like work. You just get tired, and you're like, I want to book, I want to eat, I want to stay in my room, and I watch Netflix. You know, travel is like a battery. You know, you have to recharge it.
Yeah, exactly.
So this was your first time going back to Nigeria. Since you were a kid?
No, okay. So I went twice. Look, okay, hang on. So I would go every summer holiday until I was about 14. So that was 1990. And that's when my father started his campaign. And then, so he died in 1995. By that stage, I hadn't been back to Nigeria in 5 years. And then I didn't go back until the year 2000 when we had his official funeral. And then we went back, but that was just again for a few days. And then in 2005, we went for his actual burial when we finally received his remains. But again, that was a very short trip. So basically, between 1990 and 2008, when I did this trip, I'd been to Nigeria I'd spent about 10 days in the country in total.
When you decided to do this trip and write this book about it, did you have sort of a theme in mind, like, you know, that you want, like parts of Nigeria you want to discover and write about? And then did that change over the course of 5 months, you know, because travel, things happen on the road?
Yeah, I think, you know, when you pitch a travel book to publishers, they always want a structure of some kind. You need to have an objective. Even if you don't know everything you're going to write about, you know, you rely on a certain amount of serendipity, and the publishers know that. So you say, this is, you know, roughly what I want to do. This is my objective. This is my itinerary. But obviously, once you actually, you know, get out there on the road, you know, things change. You meet people. They say go here. You know, they suggest other places. So yeah, I had a rough idea. I knew I wanted to start in Lagos. I knew I wanted to go to the north, to the east and the south. And yeah, so, you know, I would say about 70% of the book was as I, you know, was planned in advance.
Did the message of the book, your idea for the message of the book, you know, that thing you wanted to impart on it, us, our readers, change too as your itinerary changed?
I don't think the overarching message changed, but I changed. Like, you know, I discovered things about myself. I started to appreciate things about the country that, you know, I wasn't expecting. So, you know, this sort of indigenous culture, I've been quite sort of just indifferent to it. It's just there. It's part of your life. I never really thought about it. But then once I was actually out there, and you could see how terrible the hotels were, and, you know, any attempt at trying to do things in a Western way, just what, you know, it's not that great. But our actual indigenous culture is really good. And, you know, compared to other African countries as well, I guess because we're bigger, you know, the music, the costumes, you know, the philosophy, the folk tales, all that stuff is amazing. And the flora and fauna, I hadn't really thought about that either. And so I just had this, you know, renewed appreciation for that. And you know, I think that became part of my message as I went along. And now, you know, I'm planning another book in Nigeria later on. And that sort of the environmental stuff, the flora and fauna and the beauty, the natural beauty of Nigeria is really important to me now.
Yeah, I definitely noticed over the course of the book, you seem to develop a greater appreciation for Nigeria, and like that kind of shock of like, oh, I didn't even know this about my own country really comes through. And especially when you're doing, you're learning about those pillars, like those stone things that they
oh yeah, the Esua soapstones. No, oh, sorry, I haven't read the book in so long. The Essie soapstones.
Yeah, but there's definitely like I didn't know this about my own country. You know, you can see that development over time.
Yeah,
I was actually really surprised. I mean, I knew Nigeria is a big country and there's a lot of diversity there, but I was shocked myself, like following the story of just how diverse it is and how many subcultures there are, and it just seems like such a collection of people like so barely glued together in some new ways. What were some of the most shocking things, you know, as you were traveling around Nigeria and writing this book that you learned about your country? Or most surprising thing? I don't think shocking, surprising.
Well, to be honest, culturally, it was actually, I didn't realize we had this kind of sugar mummy phenomenon. You know, younger guys looking to date older women and stuff, and just how kind of brazen and out in the open it is. You know, I found that really shocking because obviously Nigeria is like any society. You know, you've got this kind of very conspicuous piety, this religious side, and then you have this kind of other side. But unless you actually live there or spend time there, you're not so aware of that. You know, you kind of view the culture through your family's eyes, you know, and my mother and everyone, you know, they're very conservative Christians, and you sort of, you forget that other side of Nigeria. You know, you kind of associate that side of Nigeria, the sort of naughty side. You know, you see that in diasporans, but actually witnessing it there was really interesting. So that came as a real shock. And I don't know, also just the gorillas, you know, the fact that we have gorillas and chimpanzees and things like that. I mean, once I read the book, the guidebook to Nigeria in advance, I knew that they existed, but it's actually when you're there, you're in the forest, and you have this realization that, my God, Nigeria is this country that, you know, we're no different. Well, you know, in the old days, we were no different from the Congo and Uganda, all these countries that you associate with primates and stuff. It's like, you know, West Africa we've somehow written that out of our identity. And so when you're in that forest and you see them and you're like, wow, this is who we are, you know, and our government just isn't promoting that and protecting it, you know, we're having to rely on the organization and charity of an American woman, Liza Gadsby, who's amazing. But, she's having to, she has to rely on funding from the West to basically protect Nigeria's, primate population. And so that was a real eye-opener for me. And again, it's something that I want to work towards in the future, is kind of, promoting that side of Nigeria.
Do you think there will be in the future a more of a concentrated effort by the country to promote tourism to Nigeria? Here in the States, like the only thing we ever hear about Nigeria is usually the bad stuff. Some corruption, there's an oil spill, the kidnappings in the north, there's conflict. But in reading the book, I had a really deep sense for the appreciation for the diversity that was in Nigeria. There was a lot I didn't know about the country there, and I really want to go there now.
Yeah, it's the problem with tourism is, what makes a country an attractive tourist destination isn't just what it it's natural, it's cultural and environmental riches. Infrastructure has a huge amount to do with it. Like, for example, I wrote the rough guide to Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, many years ago in the 90s. And, I traveled all around that country. And honestly, compared to Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire has very, very little. It has a lot, but compared to Nigeria, it doesn't really have that much. But what it did have back then, before the Civil War, was excellent infrastructure, really good, constant electricity supply, water supply, a good network of buses, good roads. And that was enough for it to become an attractive tourist destination, at least for French people. There was a sizable French population out there and stuff. And, that shows you that the infrastructure almost trumps everything else. Tourists your average tourist doesn't want to go somewhere, if it's going to be uncomfortable and, the facilities aren't going to be that great. And so that's what Nigeria really needs to work on. I think that, Nigeria can attract the sort of hardy traveler, the adventurous traveler who's not looking for comfort and whatnot. But until we sort out our, basic infrastructure, it's going to be, I think, hard to get a huge amount of people wanting to come to the country. But, the situation's improved massively, though. You've got some really good hotels now, and I'm speaking to people on the ground there's one guy who's setting up, who's like, relaunching one of the national parks, which is really exciting. And so, yeah, there's hope for the future. We've got a long way to go.
Let's talk a little bit about the book writing process. We have a lot of writers or people who want to be writers here. How long did it take you to write this book?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's complicated because I had a full-time job at the time. I've never not had a job, actually, alongside my writing. So I would say it took about two years. But if you really condense it, it was probably about more like 8 months. But it was 2 years because I had a day job, plus my editors at Granta, who published it, they had to put it on hold for 8 months because they were dealing with another problematic author before them. So that's why it ended up taking about 2.5 years. But without a job and all those kind of other things on the side, it would probably take me about 6 months, 6 to 7 months. 800 words a day. That's always the aim.
Same. It took me a couple of years to write mine. And in the last book I wrote, the book I started writing is very, very different from the book that got published. I mean, completely different story arc. When you started writing this book, did you start one way and then just completely change, maybe the structure of the storytelling? Or did you have a sense that this is sort of how it's going to be and that's where it's stuck?
No, I mean, obviously there's a structure because it's nonfiction and you have a geographical itinerary, and so you're following that. So that never changed. But I'll tell you what did change, and what was a real eye-opener for me as a writer was that my first draft was very, very empty. That's what my editor said to me. She said, "I want more." And I was like, "I don't know what you mean." And she said,
"I said the same thing.
You're giving me a lot of thoughts, your thoughts on things, but I'm not getting your feelings." And I'm like, "What's the difference?" I didn't understand it at all. And then around that time, I was actually getting therapy because actually going to Nigeria opened up a lot of things. And I was having therapy, and my therapist made this distinction as well around the same time that my editor did. And I was like, gosh, I hadn't really thought of it that way. And once you dig deep, and you look at your diary, which is something I always do. You write a diary every day of your travels. You bitch and moan, and it's just a place to put all your feelings in, your very honest feelings. And it's when you look at that you really start to understand, your journey and the decisions that you made and how it affected you and all of that stuff. And so once I was encouraged to really dig deep and think about my feelings and to put my feelings down, it actually gave the book more shape. And I think as for all writers, it's really important that you do that, because sometimes you find yourself writing about something, but because you're detached from your real feelings, that's when you start struggling with structure and why am I writing this? But once you really, think about it and dig deep, everything suddenly makes sense. And so that's what my editor was very, very good at that. Just fleshing out this story where the structure was already in place.
Very, very similar to mine. I was like, you got to have feelings. I was like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. And then, nope. So I think I forget where this quote is from, but I've heard it from James Patterson, but I don't think he originated it. It's like writing is about bleeding onto a page, like you just where you just have to let yourself bleed until there's nothing more to give.
It's true. You can't. Sorry.
No, you go.
Yeah, I'm just saying you can't. When you pour out your emotions, you have to be really honest, and that means that you're not showing yourself necessarily in the light that you want to be shown. You're putting your vulnerability out there, your vanities, your stupidities, your closed-mindedness and any epiphanies that you have, and it sort of makes you want to cringe sometimes as you're doing it. You're like, oh my God, but that authenticity is what makes it, that's what makes your writing worth reading. And you have to sacrifice that, you can't be this cool character all the time. You have to accept these weaknesses are going to be on show.
Which is very true, very true. Do you have a favorite part of the book? Or a section that you look at and say, this is the best part?
Gosh, it's such a long time since I've actually looked at it.
Do you look at your work after you write it? Like, I don't like it.
Oh, no, I can't. It makes me cringe. I see bits that I want to change, usually just a language thing. And once it's set and once it's been published, you can't change it. And so there have been times when I've been forced to engage with it, because you have to read out passages and things. And sometimes I'm glad because it reminds me that there are bits that are good, because I have a habit of fixating on what I think is wrong. And before I know it, I feel like I've written complete trash. And sometimes actually being forced to revisit it gives you a more sort of realistic, balanced view on what you've actually written. So
I think that's true for writers.
Yeah. No, I don't know any writer who enjoys reading their stuff back to themselves, but I guess they wouldn't admit it if they did anyway. So
I won't read my books after I write them. I had to recently go through to highlight some some stuff for social media that we're sharing, and I was not a fan. I was like, oh, I should have said it this way. I can't believe I used this word. Yeah.
Appreciating.
Okay, well, we are at the half, and there are a lot of questions I see in the chat. And since this is a book club, not a book lecture, we have 48 people here who have questions for you. And so I want to open it up to the floor. And so if you want to be unmuted, we will unmute you. Just make sure you don't have any sort of background noise. And say your name, where you're from, and ask the question. I think Erica has sort of been keeping track of the order of people. So I'm going to let her sort of unmute you in that process.
Sure. First of all, incredible. I love hearing the background of like any way that any book or movie is created, because I feel like I'm behind the scenes, and it's very humbling to just hear you speak about your work like that. So just wanted to say that first. And also I wanted to shout out how many places we have people calling in from. I don't know if you guys were paying attention, but I'm just gonna list out a few different countries that we have people calling in from today, which is so exciting. I want to say this is one of our most international calls yet. We have Malta, Belize, Canada, Stockholm, Wales, Kuala Lumpur, Hungary, Germany, the UK, Sweden, and Quebec. And then we have people from Seattle, Los Angeles, Baltimore, Washington, DC, Illinois, Philadelphia, Ithaca, Virginia, and Minneapolis, which I feel like, wow.
Great.
That's incredible. That's just incredible. Okay. And we had also just a lot of people sharing their favorite parts of the book, and I wanted to highlight a few of those. One was definitely your hometown visit. Another one was the bus into town when you get stuck after dark. Another one was Calabar, by far, they said. Also Nollywood, and the section about Afi Drill Ranch, because the person that said that had enjoyed visiting there so much. The celebrations for what was really interesting at the hotel in Joss, because it seemed very timely for the new year. And then a lot of people really loved your juxtaposition between your memories as a child and then you going back as an adult. And so they really appreciated that. And I thought it was really great. Two people said that, well, Chris, who's our community manager, used to live with a guy from Nigeria. And he said that he really understood his old roommate a whole lot better after reading your book.
Okay. That's good.
And we also have someone calling in from Hungary who was London born and raised, and they said that this book helped them find out much more about their motherland, and just so grateful for you for writing this. So I just wanted to sum that up, since that was really rich, like when people were writing in the chat. And then I would love, I know Nancy Brown, do you want to unmute yourself? You have some questions.
Oh, hold on, I have to make it so participants can unmute yourself. There you go, Nancy.
I just did, thank you. Well, no, thank you very much for a terribly interesting read. I unfortunately didn't have a terribly positive feeling the whole time while I was reading. So my question is this: would it have been possible for a white female to have made the same trip that you did?
They could have made the same trip. I think maybe in this day and age, they would probably think twice about being fully, well, not being honest, but being critical in their view of Nigeria. I think that any writer should be allowed to say what they want. And I think if you're open-minded and you look at things in a truthful way, you'll see positivity and negativity in whatever you write. And also, you know, as long as there's an explanation for why things are the way they are. You know, for me, the corruption And the fact that people aren't paid on time, that sort of thing is, you know, you can complain about staff workers not being motivated, but as long as you talk about the fact that a lot of them haven't been paid in several months, you know, if you balance out criticism with an explanation, then it's okay. But obviously, yeah, I have that advantage of being an insider as well as an outsider. And
because honestly, I didn't feel that you painted a terribly positive picture of your country. Now, I mean, am I being too objective or too subjective in saying that? Like, you know?
No, you're right. You know, there's a lot wrong with Nigeria. And, you know, if you speak to anyone in Nigeria, it's the same thing. And obviously, you know, I get some Nigerians who love the fact that I just told it like it is. I remember there was one person on Twitter who said, you know, who described my book as, she's basically said, you'll love the sharp writing, but you'll hate the truth of it. And so there are some people who love the truth, who find it, you know, funny and enjoyable and sort of cathartic to see that, you know, that truth revealed on the page. And then there are others who, you know, get very nervous. They think, oh God, you're painting this country in a bad light. And but I'm thinking, well, if anyone actually came here, they're likely to agree with my observations. So, you know, you shouldn't really shoot the messenger. Because for me, writing isn't a PR exercise. Well, it can be, and I've done that sort of writing before, but it's, you know, if you want to write, you know, literary travel, you have to be honest. But I also think that the positive stuff is there, but I think, you know, some writers kind of notice the negative more because, you know, that's kind of my tone. So yeah.
Well, thank you for that honesty. And also just thank you for introducing me to Nollywood. I've already watched Long John.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
He's my favorite actor. I love him.
It was great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Erica?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that now. I feel like there was such a cathartic experience of reading this because from the very little travel I've done in Africa, I mean, one of my close friends had to leave after his father wrote about the Zimbabweans' free and fair elections that were not free or fair, and he got run off the road that night, and his whole family packed up and left the country and never went back. And so just like reading your story about your father, it really made me feel like, okay, this happens to more than one person, like, and it was a way to sort of heal that story for myself. So the word cathartic just really spoke to me there. And yeah, thank you for writing in such a way that like points it out, but also I felt like you definitely had some, you know, giggles at what was happening in your country too, which was nice. All right, Linda is wondering why you picked the title that you picked. Oh, sorry, Linda, I didn't let you ask your question. But do you want to explain how you picked the title?
Well, I actually am not really into book titles. You know, the title of anything I write is the very last thing I do. And so I had some other title, which was just very bland and generic. And my agent, it was something like, oh, tending the backyard, just completely uninspired. You know, I just don't care. I really just don't care about book titles. But my agent and publishers say it's the most important thing. People will buy a book based on its title, which I find really strange, but anyway. And so I just couldn't think of anything. So I was sitting with my agent and she was like, you know, well, what's your overarching thing, you know, takeaway from this book, or your motivation for wanting to write it and stuff. And so I started talking about how I wanted to see Nigeria, you know, from a touristy kind of viewpoint, as a way of dissociating myself from, you know, the bad memories around my father. And so I just wanted to see that side of Nigeria. And and then, but, you know, that I was disappointed by the tourism, you know, infrastructure there. And so she said, looking for Transwonderland, you know, Transwonderland being like a sort of metaphor. You know, Transwonderland was the amusement park in Ibadan, and you go there and it has all these pretensions of being an amusement park, but, you know, it had been sort of neglected, and in a way that is, you know, the case for a lot of the tourist places that I visited in Nigeria. You know, so much potential, but kind of, you know, not looked after properly. And so it was my agent who came up with the name, Looking for Transwonderland, and the people at Granta loved it. They said, oh, we'd publish that book based on the name alone. And I'm like, okay, I don't understand this whole title thing, but, you know. And so yeah, we went with that.
That's incredible. All right, Denise Love.
Hi there.
Yeah,
Hi.
Denise was actually one of our book winners, so we sent her the book.
All right.
From the last one.
Yes, I was excited to get this book. It was excellent, so thank you so much.
Nice.
No, the question I had is, so you mentioned, you know, you do travel writing out, you know, outside of this book, and obviously this book was deeply personal. Where would you say is the next best place to get inspired for travel and writing? Like, would you now maybe in London do a similar kind of, you know, remove the lens approach and really look around locally, or is there somewhere else in the world you'd rather go?
I would love to write a book about England one day. Because I hardly travel around England. It's so expensive to travel around this country. And so, yeah, I would love to do that. But I'm currently writing a book about Africans who live in China. So I'm kind of just finishing that. So China for me is fascinating. But I mean, honestly, for me, travel like anywhere is interesting. You know, you could like go to some tiny town in Minnesota or something and come up with really interesting stuff, because everyone has a story, every single person. You know, just because you live in a town that's small and ostensibly boring doesn't mean that the people within it and their lives within it is boring. You know, it's just up to the writer to you know, to bring it to life and, you know, to bring out that truth. And so, you know, I think most places are interesting, although obviously for me, I like developing countries because they kind of take on Western modernity, but always put a twist on it, which I find really interesting. You know, they take the religion and do it a bit differently. They take the food and, you know, they ride buses in a slightly different way. You know, I really like that. Whereas, you know, doing, I don't know, a travel piece on Norway or something, is harder, you know, because also the people are more reserved. You know, Nigeria is the perfect place for travel writing because everyone talks to you, everyone's very honest, they're unguarded. There's it's very crowded, and there's lots of opportunity for interaction and stuff. But yeah, you can write about anywhere in the world. I'll read a travel book on, and someone sent me a book recently on Siberia about the lost pianos of Siberia by Sophie Roberts. And I'm really looking forward to reading it. You know, I've never had plans to travel there, but I know there's going to be something interesting in that, you know. So for me, the destination is not the important thing. It's the actual writing itself.
Thank you.
Incredible. Kristen Park, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. I was wondering, when thinking about kind of the more traditional parts of the country and government corruption that you mentioned, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges of COVID, and how do you think that'll affect Nigeria long term?
Well, interestingly, the Commonwealth International Journal asked me to write a piece about COVID in Nigeria. And so I did it remotely. And I was interviewing lots of, health workers and that kind of thing. And what's interesting is that actually COVID has gone down in Nigeria. I mean, but there's not much testing, maybe like 0.6% of the population has been tested. But the main indicator, which is burials in cemeteries and people presenting in hospital, it's gone right down. You know, it hit a peak in March and April, but then it's sort of, you know, it's kind of not gone, but, you know, there wasn't this, you know, we weren't overwhelmed with COVID cases, which is really interesting. But the problem is that you have a government that is not committed to that kind of thing. You know, the health workers were telling me that they had to renew the budget. And of course, you remember oil prices went right down to like zero at some point. I think it was in April last year. And, you know, Nigeria relies on oil for most of its foreign revenue. And so the federal budget was completely slashed, and they had to rewrite this budget. And apparently, you know, the health budget went down, but the government still approved, you know, millions of local currency in, I think, redecorating the government, the government buildings or something. And so, you know, that's the biggest problem. You have the thing with Nigeria is that we've got a class of technocrats who are amazing. You know, these are really well-educated people. They've got PhDs from the best universities around the world. They know exactly what they're doing. They are top-class people. But above them is this political class of old men, some of who, you know, are former dictators. There are people in government right now who were responsible for my father's death. They are utterly useless. And so you constantly have this, you know, this clash of, you know, really smart technocrats who know exactly what to do, you know, who then have to deal with useless politicians. And I don't know how we get rid of these politicians, but they're the big sticking point. And that's, yeah, so that's our main challenge. But, you know, thankfully there's something about, I don't know, is it the tropical heat? No one really knows what, but COVID hasn't taken hold in Nigeria the way it has in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're lucky in that respect.
Hope it stays that way. But we have a couple of, like, we'll take like 2 more questions and then we're gonna wrap it up a bit.
Sure. Al Ibrahim, are you on? Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Noo.
Hi.
I'm just a bit of background. I'm Al Ibrahim. I'm the one in Kuala Lumpur, and I'm from Bauchi, Nigeria.
Oh, Bauchi, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
and I really enjoyed the book. Like, I'd never been in the South except for Lagos, but it really, really made me want to go to Calabar.
Oh, good. Yeah, you should.
But my question is, like, it seemed to me that in the North, you were more on the rails, like you weren't just going around like you were in other places. And I was wondering if that was like a language thing or it's like, I don't know, a safety thing, like what was it?
Yeah, well, the North it's for me, it's culturally very different. And I think it doesn't have, because my itinerary was very much, I was trying to be a tourist. And so it was, you know, I felt like the tourist infrastructure up in the North is slightly different from the South. That's how it came across to me. I mean, there's plenty going on there, and I went to, you know, to do the bird watching and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the North is a different kind of place. Like when I was in the South, I would talk to, you know, I interacted with people slightly differently from the North. Like the North is like, because it's Islamic and stuff, it's, people are very quiet. You know, there's a sort of quiet elegance, and I don't really know what they're thinking, you know, and it's just very, yeah, do you know what I mean? You know that sort of difference, and especially when you're female as well. It felt like a different country for me, and I think I mentioned that, you know, in the book is culturally it's different, and I couldn't sort of, I felt that I couldn't access it in quite the same way as I can in the South. So
it came across. That's why I was wondering if it was like a language thing, but also for me the thing that sort of like I was drawn to that mostly because I find that, at least in like Western media, whether it's like Western books or movies or whatever, like the representation of Nigeria, it's a Southern representation of Nigeria. Like if you represent the North, then it's probably in Black Panther with like Black Panther trying to save the girls. But otherwise, like the North doesn't exist. But if you go to the country, it's like a huge part of the country.
Yeah, it's massive. And I wish someone, maybe you, could, write about Northern Nigeria, because for me, it's a real mystery. And someone said to, the film, sorry, his name escapes me. He's a writer. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. Anyway, he's a well-known writer and he grew up in Northern Nigeria. And he said to me, oh yeah, there are layers in that culture. There are just things that you wouldn't, and I didn't have a chance to, ask him to expand on it, but it's a very mysterious, very kind of richly layered culture and region. And I would, I want to learn more about it as well. So yeah, it would be great, if someone, from that region could like open it up to the world. It would be great.
Well. Anyway, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the book.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Well, actually, we're almost out of time, so we're going to conclude. Noah, thank you so much for joining us and sharing about your book. It's really great to, as Erica said, get the behind the scenes look at how books are written, how they're, the writer's journey through it all, and just getting a little bit more in depth in that story. Really loved your book. I'm glad everyone here loved the book. Thank you so much for joining us. Everyone give a virtual round of applause.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys all coming. It's amazing. Thank you. It's a real honor to see all these people reading my book. It's amazing. Thank you.
And thank you for agreeing to do this, kicking off our year with the book. And thank you, Lola, if you're still on here, for the there she is, for the introduction.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Lola. She's one of my favorite travel. She's like an amazing photographer, great travel writer, and to know that other Nigerians are doing that is just, it's fabulous.
Feeling is mutual. I'm muting now. Feeling is mutual.
Yeah, if you follow Lola's stuff, you all should. She's one of my favorite human beings in the industry. Before I turn it back to Erica, next month, The Way of Wanderlust with Don George. Don George is a legendary travel writer, wrote the Lonely Planet book on travel writing, has been around forever and ever and ever. He's going to be joining us, talking about his book. It's a collection of short stories from the road. Very excited to have him here. He's been a great teacher and mentor to me over the years, and just all around super swell guy. So he'll be here next month, and I'll let Erica sum it up. But no, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you so much, Na. And also, I wanted to invite Lola to drop her anything into the chat so that we could also follow you. I know that this has sparked interest in just Nigeria in general, and Lola has some incredible work when it comes to that. So please drop your photos or your Instagram or however you want people to find you. And I just put ways to connect with Na too. And then I just wanted to quickly go over, for those of you who may have said this was your first event, how to come to other events of ours. It's at thenomadicnetwork.com/events. We have so many events planned for this year already. And I just wanted to describe the difference of them. So this is a book club. We also have speaker events. So we have ones where people just come and present about a travel topic. And the ones that we have coming up are, I'm actually speaking about my travels tomorrow, same time. But we have next week, Bisa is coming to talk about the tips and tricks of hiking Mount Kilimanjaro. And Matt is talking about social media hacks next week. And so we have those kind of events. And then we also have chapter-based events where you could actually interact way more. They're super small, like 20 people or less. And so everyone's unmuted and they're usually just discussions about travel. We have one coming up tonight for the Pacific Northwest, and then tomorrow night for Washington, D.C. And Stephanie, who's on the call right now, is leading that. So I really encourage you to check out what events we have. We spend a lot of time putting these together for you, and they're so much fun. And, you know, we couldn't do it without the community showing up for them. And so we look forward to seeing you at next month's book club. And then just again, I wanted to remind you about our Patreon. You could definitely become a Patreon member, and I highly encourage it so that you can deepen your relationship with Nomadic Matt, budget travel, like really encourage yourself to take those trips that you want to take. We have so many perks, and for as little as $5 a month, you could really be helping us, you know, create the kind of content that you want to read. And so we have a lot offered to our Patreon members. So I highly suggest going to patreon.com/nomadicmatt. We love to have you as a part of that community too. And last but not least, I wanted to thank you so much for just being here and being present and asking your questions and reading this book. I mean, it was an incredible book, and we're so excited to have Na here. But if it were just Na, Matt, and I talking, it wouldn't be as cool as having 50 of you show up and bringing your advice and your favorite parts and your questions and all of that stuff. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful Wednesday. And any closing words, Matt or Na?
Nope, just thank you all for coming, and thank Na for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, guys. It's been great. Thank you.
I'm glad everyone enjoyed the book. And again, as Erica said, happy Wednesday, and we'll see you next month for our next book club.
Take care, everyone.